Hi, it's Professor Chew. I wanted to quickly go over some of the questions on the midterm. Part 1, the vocabulary part, was worth 78 points, with each part worth 26 points. I've just noted a few that I noticed a couple people had errors on. In the first question, you noticed there were a lot of words that started with P, or that is to say PH, fog, frock, for, frost, verloc, and plague. Please make sure you know these. They will appear again, and they are very confusing. I admit that. That's why they were on the midterm. Some of the words that a couple people got errors on were ska, which can occur in the middle of a word, meaning suppress or check, rog, gno, and enos, which means fiber. There were a couple of errors on the enos one, number 26, so I do want you to note that. And gno meaning no, as in the word agnostic. On the second part of the vocabulary, these were the prefixes and suffixes. These are really important for you to review, especially as we continue in the second half of the course with Latin. Prefixes and suffixes, you'll still be expected to know the ones in the first part of the book. And I admit a lot of them, as an example, questions 4 and 9 have very similar meanings. So note when you are doing your homework now, please notice the very often they seem like minor distinctions, but they do matter. So both etic and itic mean pertaining to, as in forming adjectives, but only itic also have this additional meaning where it's used to form, sometimes to form nouns, in particular drugs or agents, and some examples of those words: antineuritic, antiarthritic, antilithic. Some more examples of words that had very similar meanings. Oid can mean like or resembling, as in lipoid, but us can also mean resembling, but notice it has a lot of other meanings: pertaining to, and in particular full of. That is a distinct meaning for it. So those are some words: bilious, infectious, cartilaginous. Again, when you're doing your homework now, pay close attention to words that have similar meanings, but also have very small distinctions. I also noted the suffix us, which refers to a person with a condition. It does sound similar to ous. You can see one letter can make a difference. And then I also noted these compound suffix forms: rea, profuse discharge; rexus, bursting of tissues or rupture; and ragia, which wasn't on the exam. It means a profuse discharge or hemorrhage. I know there's a typo on the slide. Those are going to come up again, and obviously rea and ragia have a similar kind of meaning. Rexus has a slightly different meaning in terms of bursting instead of a discharge. So the words I put down there, I hope maybe they'll help you remember the differences between them. They are confusing words, though. So, as we move forward in the book, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to every week choose a lesson from the previous part of the semester just to check over the vocabulary words, just to familiarize your knowledge. Finally, in the third part of the vocabulary, the definitions, these are the ones that I noticed a couple errors on, and I just put in bold the words that were meant to be clues. I'm sorry if they weren't as effective as they might have been. Anyway, so number 10, myodema, meaning localized contraction of a degenerating muscle. The word for muscle was meant to be the clue. Edema means a swelling, so that wasn't entirely what you might have been expecting with the definition. But one of the tricky things I think you'll see as we move forward in the class is that even though there's a literal meaning to a Greek or Latin root word, sometimes when it is used in a medical term, it changes a little bit. It's frustrating, I know. Sometimes this is because the Greek or Latin originally has a slightly different meaning. I have that in my head sometimes. You haven't studied Greek and Latin for many years, so it's probably harder, but we will keep practicing. Paramyloidosis, number 22, meant presence and accumulation of atypical bone marrow proteins in tissues, or rather of atypical amyloid in tissues. Anyways, the point that it was atypical and that there was a presence and an accumulation was signaled, hopefully by par, the preposition, which means something that's abnormal. And of course, osis meaning a swelling or something, an abnormal condition. Desmoneoplasm, that meant newly developed connective tissue tumor. the giveaway there really in some ways was neo, which means new. Think the Matrix, neo. And des does indicate something that's connective. In 24, catalepsy. Now that word means a condition in which patients appear to be in a trance or have a rigid body posture. Now, I know there wasn't any, I don't think that one was one of the hardest ones, surprisingly, just because it didn't have anything really obvious to indicate that. Leps does indicate that something has been taken. And kata is a preposition that does mean down from, that also has the additional meaning of disordered. The best English word I can think of is catastrophe. So, it's some kind of seizing of a person in a very disordered kind of way. Maybe that's the way to think about that example. Metaplasia, number 25, meant a conversion of one kind of tissue into a form that is not normal for it. So meta can mean with or after, but it also has the meaning of change, like in the word metamorphosis. That was the meaning that was invoked there. And plasm referring to the end of the tissue. And finally, endosteoma was S, a tumor in the medullary cavity of the bone. Well, end means in. It has another form, endo, but because it was placed in front of a word oste, which means bone, the O in endo disappears. It becomes endosteoma. Okay, in the word analysis section, that was for 30 points, so 2 points each. I highlighted these words because there were some pretty frequent errors on them. Number 8, enterodynia. Now notice odin means pain, and it begins with the O. That's a word you absolutely need to know. I think it occurred back in lesson 2 or 3, and some people have still made some errors on it. Spinophraxis. Phraxis is not a compound suffix form, so the is needs to be separated. Mesodont. Odont refers to a tooth. Again, it is a combining form like odin that begins with a vowel, so be real careful about that. 24 had a similar issue, schizonychia. Onyx means a nail. Again, it's a combining form that begins with a vowel. Be real careful about that. Paracanthoma, a spine, another combining form that begins with a vowel. So that's why it was split up this way. It was not split up in the second way. Hypochiralism. Hupo, or hypo, I'm using the Greek pronunciation, means under, as in hypothyroidism, for instance, having under-functioning thyroid. So notice that the O is part of this preposition. That is tricky. And finally, just a note on desmosome. There were 2 ways to break that up, namely either by indicating that the E is not pronounced or is a separate form. I felt I didn't really explain that as clearly as I might have earlier in the semester, so I didn't end up taking off for it. It was only a half a point if it was taken off, and if it was taken off in your exam, let me know and I will fix it. But moving forward, the E, you will see it at the end of some nouns, simply to indicate, to make a word sound like it should in English. And then finally, in the definition section, most of you did great on that. No real errors there. The only time I took off a point or 2 or half was because it was pretty clear that you didn't know what the word meant. For instance, the word poly, P-O-L-I, refers to the gray matter of the brain. It looks very similar to P-O-L-Y, poly, which means many or multiple. So if you gave the wrong definition there, I did take a point off. Please let me know if you have any other questions individually about your exams. These are some common errors that I noticed. And I hope that the exam, especially with the conditions that were less than favorable because of the weather and some confusion about how many people are in our class, went okay. Please let me know, if there are things that you thought should have been addressed or if it was okay.